that were not necessarily tied right to what we expected them to be, which was all of the different earnings, specifically technology last week. That seemed like that got almost passed by the media because there was so much focus on what was going on and the eclipse of that news coming from all of the shorts that were getting squeezed to the upside. And we can get into that in just a second. But yesterday, or rather going back to last Friday, down a couple of percent. Now you're down 2%. You got a volatility index at 33. That is dead on. That is spot on to what the expectations are. And we seem to be holding on to those volatilities. We actually slipped down a little bit this morning. We were trading closer to 31. Here we are back at 33. And yet the markets are very, very tight so far this morning, except for the NASDAQ, which has been exploding to the upside. But going back to Friday for just a second, down 600 points on the Dow. Finished down 260 points on the NASDAQ. That puts the NASDAQ about 500 points off of its all-time highs that just came from Monday. So that gives you a little perspective on how much movement we had, what was really going on. We had this earnings and everybody was excited about listening to hear what had to come out of Apple and Tesla and Microsoft and all the various different tech names that were coming out. But that focus seemed to get pushed to the side. As a matter of fact, when you look at some of those names, many of those names really ran into the number. And I think that's part of the reason that we saw some of that technology really pulling back. So technology was really pulling back. It was down about 2.5% on Friday. You take a look, energy was down the very most, but every single one of the sectors was down. It finished in the red on Friday with a pretty interesting day. But there was one or two shining spots out there. How about biotech? Biotech with an absolutely wonderful day, actually finished higher. And you look at names like Biogen up 5.5%. I'm looking at Moderna was up 8.5%. Gilead was up a little bit. So Skyworks actually stood out for me when I'm looking over at the semiconductors that turned negative, down nearly 2%. But you had a couple of names that were definitely moving to the upside. But we had the weakness in the big names. We had weakness in Tesla. We had Apple, Applied Materials, Lam Research. I'm looking at it right now. Chevron, 3M, Microsoft, Honeywell, all those names pulling on the markets, whether that be the Dow, the S&P, or the NASDAQ. But the combination of all of that, and we had a huge day of volume, 55.4 million contracts again, trading in the options world. Apple leading the charge, 3.3 million of that. Nokia, 1.5 million. You had Tesla at 1.5 million. AMC had 1.1 million. That's been obviously a storied stock as we're talking about what's been going on with GameStop. AMC, BlackBerry, there's a number of other stocks that certainly have had some really amazing rides. Koss is another one of those names. GameStop still was active, 880,000 contracts, even with some of those restrictions that we talked about that were getting put in place. What a wild January, and the volumes were certainly off the hook when we take a look and see about 40 million per day trading, something close to that number. It's in the 30s, but very close to 40 million contracts per day. That's pretty amazing. So just a amazing weekend. All the chatter, all the conversations that were going on about the short squeeze. Everywhere I went, that was a conversation. It seemed at tables and people were coming up to me and asking me about it. And certainly that was a major storyline. And so what everybody wanted to know was, well, what's happening for this week? Well, everybody seemed to be pointing towards metals, not necessarily these individual names anymore, but actually looking over towards silver. We have seen an incredible amount of activity in the SLV, the SIL, the SILJ, multiple different names that are miners of silver as well. So we've seen that. So certainly there's been some incredible option paper there. I look at certain names that did stand out. You know, Pan American's one of those names. AG's another, where you just had a lot of activity, and that certainly did dominate the space. Now today, as we're looking through this, we did see silver spike up. It was up about 11% on the SLV. That was the measuring stick that I was using because that's the biggest trading vehicle that we've seen out there. That's where we've seen some incredibly large option contracts, at least in the very recent past. Matter of fact, we might as well just skip right to it. Forget about the technology. Yes, it's up about 1% today. It's the usual suspects. It's Apple, it's Tesla, it's Micron, it's NXPI, those kind of names. Industrials, yeah, they're up about 1%. Materials were up about 1%. They've kind of eased back a little bit. But right out of the gate this morning, SLV, that was the first name that hit. It was trading around 2780, call it. And about 6,800 of this week's, that's Friday, believe it or not, they were coming for the 50 strike calls. Now that is way out of the money, guys. And just to put a little perspective in this, 11% move pushed the stock up to these levels. So to see this getting anywhere towards 50 is something pretty interesting. They were about 10 cents to 20 cents, something like that. But it was some pretty decent size. And that was a pretty interesting trade to see because you could see some of the mania going on here. But a lot of people talking about squeezes, a lot of people talking about pushing, and there certainly is across the board. We've seen a lot of activity in a lot of the different materials names, specifically silver of late, but that definitely stood out. Uranium is the other one that stood out for me. CCJ, Cameco. Now this one trading just above $13 a share. They're buying 4,700 of, again, this week's expiring, the 05 February's, the 13 calls. Now those were going for about 25 to 55 cents. That risk reward, that is a possibility of something that could be pretty good because stock's already a little bit in the money, trading a little bit over 13. And now you've got these 13 strike calls going for as much as 55 cents. Last I looked, 4,700 of those. They were also buying the 13 and a half. They were also buying the March 14s. So a little bit of activity there that certainly grabbed the attention of us here at the Market Rebellion. Guys, I hope you love this shirt. You like this shirt with the bull? The Minnesotan. It's a great place. There is a piece of every one of those that gets sold that goes to a charity foundation that I'm a part of, Twin Cities Lime, which is great. So really appreciate that. Really appreciate all the help. A lot of people out there who've done a great job at buying them, and it's quality. They have the greatest stuff in the world. Folks, have a great day of trading. I will see you at 11. I'll also see you at 4 o'clock. That's both Central Time. Until then, we'll see you next time on The Take, 9:30 tomorrow morning, Central Time. Giddy up. Let's